Good morning and welcome to another live today. We're going to look at a couple of videos that I feel really important. But before we start that, I just want to ask you all, if you support this channel, please subscribe, hit the notifications link and select all. That way when I do a live or release something, you're notified straight away. It's really important. So subscribe, like, and share as much as you like, as much as you want. It only takes you 60 seconds to subscribe. So the first video we're going to look at today, I come across this the other day. Two New South Wales police officers were jailed for not just assaulting a woman with a disability, but abusing her. And in my opinion, it's absolutely torture what they did to this lady. Absolutely despicable. I believe they should have got double the sentence of what they got, a non-parole period of 10 years for what they did to this poor woman. Absolutely dreadful. And that's a bad reflection on New South Wales police. It really is. So we just show that first video, please, Chris.
Two former police officers have been jailed for assaulting and pepper spraying a mentally ill woman in Sydney's West. Their own body cameras and CCTV captured their horrific actions. Emma Olsen joins us now from the Sydney newsroom. Emma, this footage is quite distressing.
Yes, Tallulah, it is. However, I must stress the judge today ruled it is in the public's best interest to inform them of just how bad the actions of these law enforcement officers were. Police were called to help a 48-year-old mentally ill woman on an Emu Plains street in January 2023, but instead they assaulted her. Constable Timothy Trouch and Senior Constable Nathan Black kicked, stomped and dragged the lady by her hair. They also used pepper spray on her face and genitals. Trouch can be seen in this image smiling as she tries to run away. When nurses asked him at hospital if he'd sprayed her genitals, he replied, "Yes, you have to do what you have to do." It's also been revealed that Constable Black shared his body cam footage with a co-worker, bragging about how good the video was of her being beaten. Today, both men have been sentenced to prison. Black handed 5 years and 9 months, while Trouch received 3 months less. Both will be eligible for parole in 2028. The acting police commissioner said in a statement today that this is one of the worst examples of ethics he has ever seen, adding that this is not what they stand for as police. Although justice has been served, the victim will never know, as she has since passed away.
Okay, so there you go. Police brutality at its finest. It's not just an assault. It's not just abuse. But when you get a defenseless woman naked, who was naked at the time, with mental health issues, get the pepper spray, put it up close to her eyes and spray her in the eyes, then turn around and spray her between the legs with pepper spray. That is torture, in my opinion. They should have got doubled what they got. They should have got a non-parole period of 10 years, not 2 years. 2 years jail. And I'll bet you any money you like, when they go to jail, it's a minimum security prison because they're police officers. They should be going to a maximum security prison with no protection at all. They don't deserve anything less. They're animals. Absolute animals. And then this is not just a one-off. I mean, this happens all the time to people with disabilities, especially people with mental illness. It's absolute abuse and torture. Stomping on the woman, dragging her around by the hair. That whole episode for that woman lasted about an hour. They thought it was funny. They were laughing and making jokes. They were sending their own body cam videos off to other people. What they got, in my opinion, was nowhere near enough. They're disgusting animals. They should never be allowed to be employed in a government job ever again. And like I said, minimum 10 years, non-parole. For what did they do to that poor woman? She ended up dying about 18 months later from cancer. And the reason she had an episode was that her carer recently passed away and she went off her medication. So she's lost someone important to her. Then people who turned up and were supposed to protect her assaulted, abused, and tortured her. Now, a year or two ago, I interviewed the Assistant Police Commissioner in New South Wales, and he said all the right things about how they try and interact with people with disabilities in an appropriate and a positive way. Well, I'm sorry, I don't believe you anymore, Commissioner. It's the proof's in the pudding. What your officers did is torture. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. So our second video today, again, it's with Senator Jordan Steele-John, where he's interviewing senior management of the NDIA about their reforms. And for those people who are blind or vision impaired who can't see the screen, the last few minutes, they have no answer. None. They're just looking at each other and saying, and looking at each other and like, what do we say? What do we do? He's got us. He's nailed us. Now, I did a video the last time about Deputy CEO John Dardo, how Senator Jordan Steele-John nailed him as well, where he had a case where a person with a disability is getting $480,000 a year, $40,000 a month, and only $20,000 is being spent on his needs as a person with a disability, and the other $20,000 will be spending it on booze and holidays and rent and mortgage payments and all the other stuff. And when Senator Jordan Steele-John questioned him, how many people? Oh, thousands. Then a bit more scrutiny by the senator, and then it went down to hundreds. A bit more scrutiny by the senator again, went down to dozens. More scrutiny, more specific questions. It went down to multiple people on the NDIS. Then his last comment was, well, it's actually unscrupulous service providers forcing their clients to do it, to make these false claims. So is it thousands, hundreds, dozens, multiple, or service providers forcing their clients to do these things? Unfortunately, I didn't believe a damn word that came out of Deputy CEO John Dardo's mouth. Not a damn word. Yep.
Hi, we've got a comment from El Serena. Thank you for highlighting these terrible, torturous New South Wales police actions against a person with mental health condition and or psychosocial disability. We often find we are not included.
Absolutely. And you are included. And every person with a disability, whether it's a physical or intellectual or psychosocial mental health issue, we're all part of the disability community, and everybody's just as important as the next person. And the treatment that poor lady got was absolutely dreadful. It was torture. Nothing else can be said other than torture. Now, I've spoken to people in the past with these sorts of issues that this lady had, and they all say the same thing. When the police turn up, they're not there to assist. They're not there to de-escalate. They make things worse. Now, police don't have specialised training to deal with these specific issues that people have. And that's not the fault of the person with a disability or the support worker. That's the fault of the police commissioner, the New South Wales government. That's their fault. That's their responsibility. That's their job, not ours. So thank you for your comment. I do appreciate it. The Deputy CEO of the NDIA, John Dardo, as I said, I don't believe a damn thing that comes out of his mouth. He's there for one reason and one reason only: to do the government's bidding. not to help people with disabilities or support the support workers or carers, but they're there specifically to do what the government wants. Now, the NDIA started with the Labor Party, the ALP, and it's going to end with the ALP because they're systematically destroying the NDIS. So basically what they're saying is because there's so much fraud going on, we're going to cut everybody's funding so there's no more fraud. That's basically, in my opinion, what it boils down to is remove everyone's funding so they can't be defrauded. In other words, turn up to a job, do your job, and because you might spend your money on alcohol or gambling, we're not going to pay you. Just say we make sure you don't do those things. It's ridiculous. But we'll just play that video. I'll let the whole thing play out. And I really want you to listen to Senator Jordan Steele-John from the Greens. He asked specific questions. And right at the very end, the senior management of the NDIA are speechless because he's nailed them. Play that, please, Chris.
All right. So I put through an OPD in the last Senate sitting for a couple of key documents and figures from the government. I've got the OPD information back through that process, and what it appears to me is that if you add up a couple of the reforms that the government has framed as anti-fraud, which are primarily, and again, I'm interested in whether I've read this correctly, plan management and support coordination changes, particularly the commissioning pieces that you've spoken about, differentiated pricing for unregistered providers, mandatory registration, and ministerial decision-making in relation to pricing and fraud measures. If you pull those together, given the values you've assigned them in the OPD you've provided, we get to about $5 billion more broadly in terms of the overall amount that the government has forecast you will be cutting from the NDIS in the next 4 years or so. That total is 37.8 billion. So 5 billion of the 37.8 billion are attributable, in my interpretation, to measures that you've framed as anti-fraud measures. Is that analysis correct?
Well, Senator, I think the starting point, which is that all of these measures are anti-fraud measures, is not quite accurate. Many of the measures you refer to go to what I would describe as the objective would be to improve the performance of the market. In the particular example of plan managers, there are some particular concerns we have about the role that some plan managers are playing in the system in relation to fraud. But many of the other measures that you indicated, their purpose is actually to improve the service quality or improve the cost effectiveness of the market.
Okay. Do you have the OPD table in front of you that outlines the reform items and the amount of money that you intend to allocate to those in terms of the cuts and savings? All right. Okay, so I just want to get this clear because it's actually quite useful for the community more broadly. So where we've got item 3, for example, plan management and support coordination reforms, are you saying that would not be correct to characterise that as an anti-fraud measure?
It is, but that is not its only objective, Senator.
Okay, all right. And then if we go to, say, item 8, differentiated pricing for unregistered providers, would that be described as an anti-fraud measure?
Well, officials may wish to contribute to this, but principally, no. Its purpose is not to address fraud, it's to improve the functioning of the market and to deliver better value, better quality services for participants.
Okay. If we look then at item If we look at the item around unregistered providers, would that be one that you would describe as a mandatory registration of providers? Is that an anti-fraud measure?
Again, I think it has a dual purpose, Senator, and
Okay.
you heard me say in my opening remarks that where we see fraud, we often see poor quality services and, in the very worst cases, exploitation and abuse. Mandatory registration offers the opportunity to improve safeguarding and to improve the quality of services that are offered to participants.
If I may just add on that one,
Yeah,
Senator,
yeah.
just to illustrate that point, and Ms Glanville may want to comment. We probably think there's four main things that registration gives you. The first is genuine safety, potentially quality safety. Second is actually oversight of quality that's not necessarily safety but has other quality aspects. The third is market information, just us knowing what's happening in the market. And the fourth is the category you're talking about, which is control of fraud. We would see registration that can address all of those things.
Okay. So then we have a budget where we've got about, as I said, 38.7 billion that you've forecast to cut from the scheme over the forward estimates. Based on your answers, we've got far less than about $5 billion of that overall amount of money is directly attributable to anti-fraud measures, with the rest coming from cuts to people's plans, supports, the services delivered to participants on the scheme, rather than actually impacting the large fraudulent provider. Is that correct?
Senator, it's a good question and I'm pleased you're asking it because I'm asked it often. When people assert that there are savings to government available from tackling fraud, it misses a key point. Mostly what occurs when we tackle fraud is that money that is being diverted away from participants who need those resources is returned to them. So we intervene to deal with fraud and integrity questions largely because we are concerned about the impact of those behaviours on participants. We intervene in those issues to deal with fraud, non-compliance and integrity because we think the community needs to retain confidence in the proper functioning of the scheme. You are correct that for the most part, there are not significant savings to government. There are some savings to government when we intervene, but mostly what occurs is an improvement of outcomes for people with disability who need support.
Going on the answers that you've given today and on the information of the OPD, you've confirmed to the Parliament that there will be $38.7 billion cut from the scheme over the forward estimates, and that less than $5 billion of that amount of money will come from anything that could be described as an anti-fraud measure. So the vast majority of what we've got here in this budget are cuts made to participants, impacting them rather than impacting the large private providers who are the primary perpetrator of fraud in the system. So we have a wildly disproportionate impact falling on people who are doing nothing wrong, rather than falling on the providers, the large private providers who are doing something wrong. And yet your government is talking a lot about fraud in selling this legislation. But actually what you've just told me is it's mostly about cuts to people's plans.
Senator, your question misunderstands the evidence I've just provided. There will be very significant impacts on providers who seek to take money from people with a disability. That is the purpose of the fraud measures, and I can ask officials from the NDIA to step through those at a future point. We have many hours together. We do expect very significant impacts in this regard by way of the measures we're proposing. However, in terms of savings to government, intervening to prevent fraud, as I have already explained, generally returns money to people with disability who need it, not to consolidated revenue.
Yeah. So in terms of talking about the dollars.
Which is to say, it's wrong to say that there will be no impacts on providers.
Yeah, but in terms of the dollars, because we're talking about the budget, we're talking about people's funding. The vast majority of the cuts you're making are to people's services and supports, the therapies, the support hours that they need to leave the house to maybe connect with their community, find and keep work. This is where the cuts are coming. And your own government's figures, the OPD information that I've just quoted to you, shows that far less than 5 billion, which is not even 10% of the overall value of the cuts that are being made in the budget, actually come from things that you would describe as anti-fraud measures. In fact, if I take it back to the OPD, the only one that you were able to specifically describe as that even mentions the word fraud is the making of the minister, giving the minister the power to set pricing and take unilateral action in relation to fraud. That's less than $1 billion in the overall scheme of things.
Senator, your question incorrectly conflates two things.
No,
The package as a whole will have a very significant impact on fraud. And given the tenor of your questioning, I might ask officials to step through the investments that are proposed and the impact we expect it will have. We have to deal with fraud.
I agree.
But as I have said on a number of occasions now, when we do so, we don't see significant savings to government. We see better outcomes for participants. And I think you would agree that we have to do those things for those outcomes. We don't do it for fiscal purposes. We do it to deal with the harm that arises for participants when fraud goes unchecked.
Yep, I'm well aware of that, Minister, and I do not need to hear from the Fraud Fusion folks at this point in the day. As I hope you would be aware as a disabled person, I am fully aware that fraud impacts disabled people. It impacts us most directly. We are the ones who lose the services when the fraud occurs. And it has been my role in the Parliament and the Greens' role in the Parliament to champion anti-fraud measures. And we've done that consistently. And I am a proud member of the current inquiry into fraud within the scheme. And we have heard consistently in that inquiry that it is the large private provider that is the primary perpetrator of fraud. And that is where reform is most certainly needed. The point that I am making is if you look at the actual cuts you are making and think about the impact that will have on people's lives, the burden and the weight of these reforms sit with the disabled people and our families, the participants, the victim of the fraud, rather than...
I think I'll just pause here for a moment. What Senator Jordan Steele-John is actually saying is 100% correct. The savings that they're going to do on the fraud is less than 10% of the funding, so less than $5 billion out of the $38 billion. And it's affecting people's funding. The problem is they don't care. Senior management and the government just don't care because there's been a media beat up of the NDIS and there is fraud going on, not denying it. But they just don't care. And the excuse is, oh, I'm just doing my job. Well, that's not a good enough explanation or answer. I mean, that's what the Nazis said at the end of the Second World War when they lost the war, when they were, you know, regarding all the Jewish people they murdered. I was just doing what I was told to do, just doing my job. In my opinion, that's a piss poor excuse. It's just a cop-out saying I'm just doing my job. They don't care. They're getting their big money. They're getting their big pay packets. They don't care about people with disabilities or their families. They don't care about the support workers who go well above and beyond to help people with disabilities in their day-to-day lives. They don't care about any of that. They're just doing their job. That's great. They're just doing their job. So did the New South Wales police officers. They were just doing their job too, but they got jail out of it. Press play, please, Chris.
Measures which will impact the perpetrator of the fraud, the large provider. That is my point.
Well, the thing is that is incorrect, and it misunderstands the
Well, that's what the numbers say, though,
It misunderstands the
Mr. Dunlap.
investment. You conflate the fiscal impact of the package with the overall policy impact of the package. The package contains very significant investments to tackle fraud wherever we see it, including where we see providers perpetrating fraud against disabled people. And we expect that to be significant, and it's important. But we didn't design that to return savings to government. We designed those interventions to ensure that people who are assigned resources to support them living their best life as a person with disability actually receive those supports. That is the purpose of that intervention. If you designed it to return money to government, it would have the practical effect of taking money away, and that's not the purpose of those interventions.
Yes, it is.
I think many people will look at the dollar figures and wonder why they themselves, as participants in the scheme, are bearing the overwhelming weight of the cuts that you are making. In a piece of legislation that you've overwhelmingly framed as an anti-fraud measure, and yet the only specific things that your documents detail are a less than $1 billion saving. I'm quite surprised. I came into this estimate session prepared to kind of take the government's rhetoric at its face value and assign each of these 4 areas of so-called reform as having some impact, in your view, on fraud. And so that would bring you to about a $5 billion figure, leaving $33 billion left over that are coming from participants. But you haven't even been able to confirm that. So I think there is a fundamental disconnect here between the government's language, which is often around tackling fraud, and what the numbers say here in the budget papers and in this OPD answer. But I don't want to push the chair's goodwill today so early in the morning. I suspect I've been going for more than 15 minutes at this point, Chair.
I was about to ask you if you would be willing to rotate.
I am very willing to rotate, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Steele-John.
Chair, before we do,
Yeah.
because I think it is germane to the point being made here, and I noticed that Mr. Dardo's at the table, and I know that you said you didn't want to hear from the Fraud Fusion Task Force.
I've got questions for him later, so I'll take them in the later block.
But can I just make a point, and maybe we'll come back to it?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Dardo has given quite a lot of evidence in this committee before about the, if you like, the ratio of what you can book as fraud versus other activities that have adverse effects that we would not be able to pursue. And I think we just put a place marker there because that's a
and he's given
very
evidence to that
important
effect in an inquiry hearing, and I have questions on that later in the program.
Okay.
But I think it's not correct, Senator Steele-John, to assert, as you've done, that this package doesn't tackle fraud. There is $207 million over 5 years to make sure that the Fraud Fusion Task Force is ongoing. There is supplementary funding over 3 years of $73 million for the NDIA payment integrity workforce to continue. There is new funding of $358 million over 5 years to enhance integrity for the payment system. These are very significant interventions that will benefit people with disability who should not be exploited by providers doing the wrong thing.
Minister, to be very, very clear with the government and with yourself, disabled people are not silly. We've lived and died by what decision government does and doesn't make in relation to the NDIS for over a decade, and before that, the various different schemes that did or did not work. And we've come to understand that when it comes to budget rhetoric and government policy, one of the most effective ways to understand intent is to follow the money. And so what the community is doing and what I'm doing here on their behalf is following the money as detailed in your documents presented to the Senate in response to my OPD. which demonstrate that far less than $5 billion of the overall amount of money that is placed and bookmarked as going back to the budget from NDIS cuts come from anti-fraud measures.
Senator Steele-John, do you not accept the evidence
Oh my God.
that fraud largely doesn't deliver tackling fraud doesn't deliver fiscal savings? I'm struggling to understand your logic because, as I've said a number of times now, when we tackle fraud, the saving goes to the participant rather than to government. That's why you don't see those numbers in the budget, Senator.
To be very fair to you, Minister, there is quite a gap in your legislation where we would expect tangible, serious anti-fraud measures to be. It's one of the more surprising elements of a bill delivered in a context where fraud has been so much part of the conversation. It's been noted not only by myself but across the Parliament that there's been a lot of rhetoric around anti-fraud and a lot of focus on it. And while we welcome the focus, we question why there is so little substance in this bill when it comes to anti-fraud measures. So I do believe that you could have done more in the budget to tackle fraud and to hold these absolute mongrel providers to account for the abuse and exploitation that they are viciously perpetrating upon disabled people. They're no better than criminals, many of them, and they are financially exploiting disabled people. But your budget tells the Parliament that actually when it comes to things that'll get some of that money back, you've put far more focus on cutting people's support hours and the funding in their plan than you have holding these people to account.
Absolutely.
But I did say that I would rotate the chair back a while ago, so I will do that at this point.
Thank you,
Yes,
Senator
except that
Steele-John.
I think the practical consequence of making a long statement that includes information that's inaccurate means I really do have to respond. Schedule 2 of the bill creates a whole range of new powers for the NDIA, explicitly targeting, enabling them to target fraud. It is a very important schedule, and I am surprised that more attention has not been paid to it, Senator. The second, I have indicated to you also the scale of the investment that the government is making to ensure that the NDIA and the Commission have the resources that they need to tackle fraud. But we've been clear, Senator, with the community, and Minister Butler was clear in his speech at the outset. The reforms do also work to tackle sustainability and runaway cost growth. We're really clear about that and upfront about that, and we do this because we believe that it is in the interests of people with disability that the scheme retain community confidence, be sustainable, and be here for the long term.
Thank you. I know.
Going, but I want to rotate.
And I appreciate that, Senator Steele-John. Thank you.
Authorised by J. Steele-John, Australian Greens, Canberra.
I can hand back to the chair.
So you can hear the Senator nailing down the figures. $38 billion over the next few years are being cut from the NDIS. And $5 billion of that is towards because of fraud. So 38 billion, 5 billion, 5 billion, 38. It just doesn't add up. I think Senator Jordan Steele-John's absolutely right. You look at the figures, you follow the money, and it's all about cutting funding, not stopping fraud. They want to stop the fraud by cutting everyone's funding back to next to nothing. So there's no more fraud. Just doesn't make sense. Truly doesn't. And I've got to admit, Senator Jordan Steele-John, he's been doing an excellent job. He has been nailing down the senior management, the NDIA and the ministers with these new reforms. And I appreciate everything he's done. I think he's doing a fantastic job. I think he's been underestimated and underappreciated for what he's doing, holding the government accountable. Because we all know the government doesn't give people squat, whether you have a disability or not. You don't get nothing from the government. If they're going to give you tax cuts, then they give you those cuts, but they pull the money out from somewhere else to give you those cuts. So you don't actually get tax cuts. You might get a lower tax rate, but other taxes may increase to compensate. Now, you look at Pauline Hanson's Fire the Liar campaign. Now, I've been watching very closely to that, and I wasn't shocked to find out that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, since he's left university with his free education, since he's left university, he's had one job for 12 months as a bank teller. The rest of his career, he's been sucking off the tit of the taxpayer. He has no idea what it's like. He says he grew up in House Commission. Well, so what? So that means of other people. But means of other people aren't making a career out of lying to everyone. Now, I've always said, if Anthony Albanese is a true socialist, he has his own ideology. He doesn't care how that impacts anyone else. He just thinks he knows best, and what he puts forward, we should all accept. Now, he earns $622,000 a year base. And when I tried to find out, how much extra he gets for his, electoral allowance and travel allowance, it kept coming up with, we can't give you the information for privacy reasons. I said, well, all right then. Every other minister, they get electoral allowance, travel allowance, all these other allowances. Give those to the Australian Prime Minister, and what does it take his base rate up to? So it's $522,000, $622,000 a year to $1.5 million a year. Now, when he retires, he's going to get that $622,000 a year for the rest of his life till the day he dies, plus a free car, free chauffeur, free office, free receptionist, free air travel. $1.5 million a year. You look at the US president. He earns about $400,000 a year. US dollars. The UK Prime Minister earns about £180,000 a year. It's about $360,000 a year. So you combine both of those incomes from the UK Prime Minister and the US President, and you look at the population of the US, it's over 338 million people. The UK is about 70 million people. Australia's sitting on 28 million people. The Australian Prime Minister earns as much as the UK Prime Minister and the US President combined. And he's turning around and he's cutting people's funding. Now, I interviewed the CEO of Carers Australia last year, and they, under their estimation, carers or people with disabilities saved the government approximately $100 billion a year. If the government had to pay somebody to come in and does what a carer does, it would cost the government $100 billion a year. The NDIS is currently costing around $51 billion a year, and they want to cut $38 billion out of it over the next few years to make it sustainable. And we've got to make it sustainable. But you don't punish the victims of a crime. You punish the criminals of the crime. Now, the last stream I did, we looked at Drew and Pete's videos on NDIS fraud, where cleaners come in. 2 cleaners came in, they spent 30 minutes at most cleaning a small 1-bedroom apartment. They billed an hour each, so 2 hours for half an hour's work, plus $100 and something for travel. How does that work out? And there was another video I watched from Drew and Pete, where a person with a disability on the NDIS was using a service provider in Queensland, and he secretly recorded the service provider. And he said, "You're overcharging me. You've used all my funding. I've got no funding left, and I've still got quite a few months to go before my plan renews." And her response was, "Yes, we deliberately did that so the NDIS would know you need more money." Why do these people have a job? Why are these service providers allowed to operate? They close down one business and open up another business just down the street within days of closing the first business. This is why we need a national registry. And I've been saying this for years. I know there are people who oppose it because it says, having a national registry of support workers and service providers removes their right to pick and choose who they want. It doesn't. It doesn't remove your right to employ whoever you want. It enables the government to follow service providers who close down one day, open up a week later, because we've seen this in Drew's and Pete's videos, or they close the business down and they go work for another business as a service provider, as a consultant, on huge money. And they're still waiting to go to court for fraud. They should be banned for life. And a few months ago when it came out in the last year about with preschoolers, how they're going to crack down on the workers there and all that. So they brought in a new law saying that if you're sacked in New South Wales, you can't work in any other state because your history's going to follow you. And I said to everyone, why isn't this going right across the board to aged care and for the NDIS? They missed a golden opportunity to put that right across the board, but because of government, all they do is bow down to media pressure. If it wasn't on the media, they wouldn't have done nothing about their childcare centres. They just would let it go. Just like Albanese did with those Jewish people being persecuted by terrorists. He knew for years that was going on, did nothing. Then Bondi happens. And I personally blame the Prime Minister for it. I despise the bloke. He's a grub, in my opinion. Nothing more than a grub. A lying grub. Fire the liar. The ALP, the Australian Lying Party. Like I said a little while ago, the NDIS has started with the ALP and it's going to end it with the ALP. every government's been in power since 2013 has stuffed the NDIS up. All the state governments shut their state-run services down and forced people onto the NDIS. But let's blame people with disabilities for the fraud. The government stuffed running the NDIS up, but let's blame people with disabilities. I don't know about anybody else, but you don't blame the victim of a crime, you blame the perpetrator of the crime. And the victims of this crime are people with disabilities and the taxpayers. And if you don't have a job, you still pay taxes, you still pay goods and services taxes, you pay sales tax when you buy something in the supermarket or a shop, or you put fuel in the car. So you do pay taxes. You mightn't pay income tax if you're on a pension, but you still pay taxes. Now, what's the thing a few weeks ago where someone from the New South Wales Police or the South Australian Police was talking about sovereign citizens. If they don't like the police and they don't like the government, then they're sovereign citizens. No. I blame the government and I blame the media for all this. Because the media want quick, sensational news articles, headlines, put on their news, and the government bows down to them. They have a symbiotic, parasitic relationship, the government and media. I despise both of those things. Mainstream media and the government. I despise them both. Anyway, that's my rant for the next week or so. Again, if anybody wants me to cover a topic, please email me at blindadvocate007@gmail.com. Or if you want to make a comment, use that email address. If you want to contact me for any other reason, just email me, blindadvocate007@gmail.com, and I will get back to you. I won't fob you off like the government fobs everyone off. We'll end it there. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.